Okay, it should have started now.
All right. So I don't have access to the recording transcript. There we go. Here it is. So before we get started, since we are recording, I will also say that this meeting may involve the remote participation by members of this committee or the community, either by telephone or by electronic means, due to the local public health emergency, novel coronavirus, pursuant to the provisions of Minnesota Statutes Section 13D-021. Just so everyone is aware that this meeting is being audio recorded and a transcript is being kept of this meeting. We'll go ahead and get started. We have a few things on the agenda, but since we have a lot of folks that are joining with telephone numbers and we might not know everybody on the call, we'll go through a quick round of introductions quickly. So maybe just your name and your relation to the committee, or the topics that are on the agenda for the day. And if you're so inclined, maybe share with us a great fall bike ride that you have gone on recently or plan to go on soon. I can go ahead and start. My name is Heather Gillick, and I am one of the co-chairs for this BAC 5E committee. I also work at the Minneapolis Public Health Department. And one of my favorite bike rides is really starting to get used to my fat bike as we're moving into the season where that's going to become useful. So I'm looking forward to, over the weekend, heading up toward Monticello to take a gander at some of the leaves and get out in the woods a bit. We'll go ahead and pass it on. We can just popcorn through this list.
I can go next. My name is Bree Woodcraft. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the other co-chair of this subcommittee. And I don't know about fall rides. However, I am coming back from Copper Falls State Park in Wisconsin near Hayward, and it's very beautiful. I highly recommend it.
Thanks, Bree. The next person that's on my list is Allison.
Hi, everybody. I'm Allison Bell. I'm the Green Infrastructure Coordinator with the City of Minneapolis, and I was invited to present on our program by Matthew and Chris. So I'm not really part of the committee, but I'm here today. In terms of fall bike rides, I'm more of a bike commuter, and I have to keep going to one project in Southwest Minneapolis. So I've been enjoying taking the Midtown bike route down there. So I can say that that's been good.
Excellent. And Adrian, you're next on my list.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. Adrian Bockheim. I'm the CPED rep. I'm a principal city planner, urban designer. And I always love biking down by the river this time of
Yeah,
year.
here we are. Okay.
Great. And then the Dans, you two are up next.
Go ahead, Dan.
Hi, I'm Dan Miller, Ward 1 representative, and I've been skunked the last 2 weeks. I haven't gotten on the bike at all, but tomorrow I'm planning to do an exhilarating ride. I'm going to be going out with Pillsbury Pedal Power on their first after-school ride, and it'll be 21 kids strong. So I'll be scratching my head afterwards.
All right, Dan Booty. I'm the MPD rep, project coordinator. And as with most seasons, riding around the river is always great, especially the number 9 bridge. And this weekend, I'll actually be not too far from where Bree was. I'll be in Iron River, Ashland area.
Thank you. Matthew, you're up next.
Hi, Matthew Deardahl. Use he, him pronouns. My title is Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator in Public Works. And my favorite bike ride is going to be back from the bike shop once I take my flat-tired bike to get it fixed, it's been busy, so it's been about a week, but thankfully I have a backup bike as well.
Hi, and I'm Matthew Hendricks. I'm the Ward 6 representative for the BAC. I use he, him pronouns, and I really enjoyed a bike ride on the Loose Line Trail last weekend.
Thank you. Alyssa and then Jenny.
Hey everyone, Alyssa Shuffman. I use she and they pronouns. I'm the Ward 9 rep to the Bicycle Advisory Committee and also the full committee chair. And my bike ride I'm looking forward to this fall is my sister and her wife are going to have a baby. And I am so excited whenever they have that baby due November 5th to bike over to their house in St. Paul and visit the baby for the first time.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jenny Borden. I use she, her pronouns, and I represent Minneapolis Public Schools on the Bicycle Advisory Committee. And I had some great bike rides today. The bike fleets are out. We've had beautiful weather. And so I was with both Pratt School and Bancroft School taking some lovely neighborhood rides.
Great. Chris and then Natalie.
Hi, Chris Kartheiser, City of Minneapolis Public Works. I help staff the committees. And last weekend, my girlfriend ran in the Twin Cities Marathon, so I was biking all around Minneapolis and St. Paul to try and track her down.
That's delightful. This is Natalie Wagner. I am the Ward 10 representative for the BAC, and I have done that ride before with a friend, and it's a lot, but great. Not as much as running the marathon. And I like just biking anywhere around the river or any of the lakes at this time of year because I feel like you get such a great view of all the leaves. So yeah, it's been a beautiful one. So thanks.
Great. We'll go ahead and move to our folks who are on the phone. And if anybody wasn't here to hear the prompt, we're just doing names and pronouns and your connection to the BAC or the things that are on the agenda today. And then a favorite fall bike ride or that you've taken or you are planning to take. So if anyone on the phone is muted, now you can hit *6 to unmute yourself or unmute on your phone. We'll go ahead and start with the person whose last 4 digits are 1426.
Hi, can you hear?
Yes.
My name is Mike Peterson. I'm a resident on 10th Avenue and 31st Street in South Minneapolis. And he, pronoun, I enjoy biking the Greenway. And I'm here because I'm interested in the idea of expanding some of the bike paths along 10th Avenue. Kind of in our neighborhood. So I'm here for that agenda item.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Go to the number ending in 9756.
Hello, my name is Lee George. I hope this is the third time I said my name. I live in Powderhorn Park on Elliott and 32nd, and I am also interested in expanding Greenway access by thinking about bike pathways along 10th Avenue to think about access to the Greenway and also safety and access to Powderhorn Park. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, Lee. We'll go now to the number ending in 4890.
Oh, am I unmuted?
Yep.
Well, that's my husband, Mike Troutman, who is taking care of a child at this time. He'll be on the phone in a few moments, but I'm also Amy Blumenshine, and we are part of the neighbors group that is here. to suggest that we could be a pilot for a Southside Greenway as suggested in the 2015 document. And we look forward to talking with you about it. And my favorite bike ride these days is to go from Powderhorn over to Lake Harriet and jump in the water for a refreshing dip. We are so fortunate to have these opportunities. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. That sounds wonderful. We look forward to meeting Mike too when he's able to join. Go to our next number, start with 4706.
Oh, there I am. Hi, this is Nathan Lundgren. I'm part of the neighbor group with Lee and Amy and Mike. I'm at the corner of 32nd and Elliott. Interested in some of the same issues, and don't think I ever met a bike ride I didn't like, but I am specifically looking forward to seeing the Cedar Lake Regional Trail, which I've always really enjoyed, open back up again in its entirety.
Fantastic. And I didn't quite catch your first name. What was your first name again? All right. Pivot forward to 0986.
Hi, this is Anna Lundgren. I am part of the neighborhood group also. I live on the quarter of 32nd and Elliott. And I'm just here to discuss the potential Greenway on 10th Street. You know, I myself am not much of a biker, but I do have two little girls, so I like to follow them around on their bikes in Powderhorn Park. Thank you.
Awesome. Go down to the number ending in 4078. Person with that number, if you're talking, you are muted. If not, we can move forward. Okay. Move forward to the numbers ending in 6059.
This is
Hi.
see her,
Mike
Amy
Trupp.
Blumenschein. There's a bit of a lag when the device says you are no longer muted. We have a little
Okay.
blurb out.
This is Mike Troutman, and with his grandson Eli, and we are reading a book after nap time. And I love to bicycle to Lake Nokomis, where I can watch Eli play in the sand. Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks, Mike. And the other number that was talking. Don't want to cut anybody off before we move forward. So if you haven't introduced yourself, why don't you go ahead and jump in now?
Hi, this is Erin Emery. I live at 31st and 10th. I am here, like a lot of my neighbors, in support of increasing bike traffic on 10th Avenue and decreasing or eliminating car traffic.
Perfect. Thanks, Erin. Anyone else who's interested in introducing themselves as they join here?
Hi, my name is Jory Engstrom, and I am here because I was the one who asked my neighbors to join in with stopping all this speeding around our neighborhood.
Jory, welcome. Thank you.
Hello.
Any other introductions? All right, well, thank you everyone for joining. We'll go ahead and move forward in the agenda here, and Alyssa, without further ado, I can pass it over to you.
Thanks, Heather. And this is actually going to be more of a joint conversation with me and both the Matthews. Thank you to Matthew Hendricks and Matthew Deardahl for being part of the discussion on Greenways today. I have my camera off because I've been having some internet connectivity issues. So for those of you who can see video, sorry, I'm not on video. You know, really wanting to take today as an opportunity to revisit the concept of greenways. This has come up over and over again for the Bicycle Advisory Committee over the years, and with so many new folks being a part of the committee, with it being the time of year that we start thinking about the capital improvements process and the budget for 2022 and beyond. I think it's a really great opportunity for all of us to get regrounded in some of the discussion that has happened and a lot of the organizing that has happened around greenways the last number of years. So I will briefly give you a loose working definition of what a greenway is, and talk a little bit about why we have some of them here in Minneapolis. And then I'm going to turn it over to the Matthews to talk a little bit both about city policy stuff and also about the really amazing community organizing efforts that have happened that have resulted in us having any greenways in the city at all. So with that, I'm gonna, like I said, start with a loose working definition of what is a greenway. So I will say usually a greenway is a shared use path, right? So walking, rolling, biking on some sort of what I will loosely call undeveloped land, but sometimes not. The city of Minneapolis has different kinds of typologies that they name in the Greenways study that they did a number of years ago. And so there are things that they call full greenways, which more closely resemble trails, and then also neighborhood greenways, which do not really resemble trails and are more like north-south connectors that are low volume traffic streets. But, you know, I would say usually in a more like global way, people think about greenways as kind of linear parks, right? That's like part of where the green part of greenways comes from. That they are often traffic-free, car-free corridors. And so they're really focused on walking and rolling and biking and prioritizing those over car travel. But there is a little bit of a flexible definition here. One of the things that came out of the Greenway study in 2015, I remember we had a robust discussion at the BAC, and like everyone really had a different understanding of what was or wasn't a greenway. And it didn't always line up with what the city thinks of as a greenway. So that's kind of a loose and flexible working definition, but I think it's useful to start with like the basics of what we're thinking about and kind of acknowledge that everybody thinks about greenways a little bit differently. And I think, you know, one of the things I want to highlight before we jump into some of the policy specifics is why they matter, right? They matter because they are those connectors. They tend to be really long corridors and ones people can rely on when we talk about bicycle and pedestrian planning. You know, especially with bicycle planning, one of the complaints I've seen over the years is like, we made this bikeway and it doesn't connect to anything, right? It just like dead ends in the middle of nothing. And so thinking about the importance and the power of having corridors that are really like one long connection that people can rely on. But there are also opportunities to expand green space. There are opportunities to take space back from cars, and a way that we can think about reimagining our streets, right? Like so many folks look at the Midtown Greenway in particular and hold that up as an example of the kind of transportation we can have as a city. So I think, you know, beyond some of the specifics of like why a particular greenway is important, it's also good for us to realize that like greenways matter to our collective imagination and are really important. So, and Matthew Hendricks will talk a little bit more about this, but you know, one of the reasons that we have greenways in Minneapolis is because community folks have been organizing for them for a very long time, right? They are not something that has been, largely speaking, driven by city process. They have been driven by people who are walking and biking and really interested in having these corridors where we're like, it's easy for people to plan a trip in the winter on a bike, or it's easy for folks to feel like, yes, I can take my kids out on their balance bikes on the street, right? So it's about what those folks have been sort of dreaming and scheming and demanding of the city. They're not really a city-driven, have not historically been sort of a city-driven project. So I think given that, it's really important for us as a committee to think about how do we engage and how do we continue to push for things relative to greenways, because they're not sort of like a natural thing that the city pushes for. And Matthew, I don't know if you want to, Deirdre, if you want to characterize that a little differently, but I think that's what I would have to say about what greenways are and why they matter to us.
I'll share a little bit after the other Matthew. Who is muted.
Thank you. So my name is Matthew Hendricks, and I'm the Ward 6 citizen rep on the BAC. And I've also done kind of related to, but separate from BAC work, done some other advocacy for greenways in Minneapolis. So I'll talk a little bit about the North Side Greenway process and then the South Side Greenway process that I'm aware of, and then turn it over to Matthew Deirdre. So the North Side Greenway is about a 4-mile route as proposed that runs north and south through the center of North Minneapolis. It would go from Victory Memorial Parkway at the north end to Glenwood Avenue at the south end. And the 4-mile route would connect 6 parks and 4 schools. In terms of the timeline, the concept was first presented to neighborhood groups in 2008, and there was generally positive feedback from people attending those groups, and so, attending those meetings. And so in 2009, Transit for Livable Communities gave a grant to fund 10 planning workshops with various community organizations. And the feedback from the surveys at those workshops were positive. And so in 2012, the city of Minneapolis got involved with support from a SHIP grant, and they held some additional community open houses and did some more detailed surveying during the open houses. And that feedback also was generally positive, not unanimously positive, but the majority of the comments were positive. And so the city continued to pursue other funding resources for more in-depth community engagement. And in 2013, Blue Cross Blue Shield made a significant grant to the city of Minneapolis and funded a 3-year, very extensive engagement process. I would say, watching projects for the last 15 or so years, this is one of the more robust community engagement processes I've seen for any project in the city. So this was a 3-year process. It involved a lot of different ways of getting involved, and it culminated in a 1-year pilot project on 5 blocks of Irving Avenue. The blocks were between Falwell Park and Jordan Park, and the pilot project included 3 different designs, including one block that was completely closed to traffic. So for 1 year, that block had no on-street parking and no ability for residents to drive on it. And that block turned out to be the most popular design based on the surveys from the different blocks that had different designs. So the city's most recent Capital Long Range Improvement Committee report, so that's the committee that advises the city on public works spending for the next 5 years. That report shows funding for phase 1 of the Northside Greenway as a 2026 project. So if this schedule holds, the construction will begin on the Northside Greenway about 18 years after the first community engagement, and about 9 years after the temporary pilot segment was installed. So a couple things from that. First, this was definitely a long-term project, and that's clear just from the timeline. But I also want to emphasize that it took the involvement and blood, sweat, and tears from dozens of people, as well as community engagement involvement from hundreds of people giving responses to surveys or participating in events to get this project on the map. So it's not a small feat to get something from a concept to being part of the city's plan. And so I don't want to undersell what all those people were able to do in that amount of time. So that's kind of the background on the North Side Greenway. Now turning to the South Side Greenway. I think those in this meeting are probably pretty familiar, but I'll just give a quick overview of the route. So it runs mostly on 10th and 11th Avenues, 11th Avenue through downtown and 10th Avenue between roughly 24th Street and down to Stewart Park, where then it jogs over to 10th, down to 40th Street. Then south of 40th Street, St. Mary's is a barrier, and so then it's on Park and Portland. So it's a north-south route again, and it connects a number of parks. It starts at Gold Medal Park and connects all the way down to Pearl Park. And it also connects a number of trails. So this route makes connections to the West River Parkway trails, the Midtown Greenway, the River Lake Greenway at 40th Street, as well as the Minnehaha Parkway Grand Round trails. And there are two schools along the route. So there's Anderson and then also the Wilder School Complex as well. So in terms of the community engagement for this project, the Midtown Greenway Coalition board and staff have long advocated for improved connections to Powderhorn Park and Stewart Park. And I think that advocacy dates back to the early 2000s, if not earlier. And in 2013, Tim Springer, who's the former executive director of the Midtown Greenway Coalition, partnered with Tool Design Group, who's a design and engineering consultant company, to release a report that summarizes the planning and community engagement up until 2013. And then in 2014, Twin Cities LISC supported another wave of community engagement that involved a survey of local residents about design and route preferences. And the report from that work was attached to this meeting's agenda. And if you haven't been able to access it, you can reach out to somebody on this call or in this meeting, and we can make sure you can get a copy of that report. And then in 2016, Blue Cross Blue Shield funded a series of 5 block parties. Those took place in September and October of that year. And some on this call or in this meeting may have been at one or more of those block parties. So each one had a local resident host. They took place between 24th Street and 40th Street along the 10th and 11th Avenue segments of the route. And for these events, the block was closed off to traffic for the evening. There was a presentation about potential block designs, and residents were able to give feedback via surveys and conversations with block hosts. And the feedback from these block parties was positive overall, and there was some location-specific advice that came out of the conversations. Just one example, the redesign of the cul-de-sac barrier south of Lake Street was raised multiple times. So the general interest was to have that barrier redesigned so that bicyclists could travel through it. And then from 2017 to 2021, members of the BAC and CLIC have expressed interest in accelerating Greenway funding and Greenway build-out. And this could be accomplished through project-specific funding or through a general Greenway funding program. And the same thing I mentioned about the North Side Greenway applies to the South Side Greenway in the sense that many people were involved in the planning and the advocacy up to now, and it takes a lot of momentum to get something like this off the ground. And then in terms of general kind of background or perspective, I think we're really lucky in Minneapolis to have the Midtown Greenway as a local precedent. And we're also very lucky to have Milwaukee Avenue as a precedent. I'm guessing most people in the meeting are familiar with Milwaukee Avenue. It's a 2-block stretch of street that was converted to park in the late 70s. And it's a good demonstration of how quiet and how pleasant and how functional a street can be if it's converted to a park. And it remains popular after 40 years. So it's clearly, a good example of what can go well with that kind of a design. But Milwaukee Avenue is not the only way that a greenway could be accomplished. It's kind of one end of the spectrum, and then there are other options between sort of a default typical street and a Milwaukee Avenue design. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matthew Deardahl.
Yeah, I'll just kind of continue to add on to what Matthew has said and Alyssa before that. So I guess I'll start in like the 2018 timeframe. There's just a lot of organizational or organizing and pressure in a positive way on the city to pursue the Northside Greenway and Southside Greenway and a few others. And I appreciate all the efforts around greenways over the years, and a lot of great things happen because people, just residents in Minneapolis that care about something advocate for it, and protected bikeways is another good example. And so we were wrestling in that time with what do we do with all of these requests? Like, what do we even mean by greenways? Are they different than trails? Are they different than bike boulevards? How do they fit into our plans? And so we completed a study, and I think it was early 2019 that we completed the Greenways study, which is attached in the calendar invite. And I think one of the most interesting outcomes of that was this concept of neighborhood greenways, which we had formerly, I would say, thought of them as simply bicycle boulevards. And so that new term, I guess, official term, neighborhood greenways, was introduced into the formal city structure at that time. And the idea is that there are at least two types of neighborhood greenway typologies or ways to do it. And that would be bicycle boulevards, which you may be familiar. I think most of the people, everyone on the BAC at least is familiar, and probably on the phone call as well. But those are lower volume, we call them urban neighborhood residential streets, typically lower volume of cars, but they make really important connections to other busier bikeways, schools, parks, and other destinations. And so our bike boulevard concept is typically putting a big bicycle stamp in the middle of the street, and then trying to make the through bikeway connection as pleasant as possible with traffic diversion or volume manage or speed management. So divert traffic or slow down the cars that are there. So we have examples all over the city, the Riverside Greenway, 17th Ave, the President's Bike Boulevard, Queen Ave Bike Boulevard, upcoming in North, and so a variety of others. So this, my take on neighborhood greenways is it's basically bicycle boulevards, but better than we have now, maybe much better than we have now. So just do much more robust treatments. And then around that same time, 2019, 2020, we were working on the Transportation Action Plan. And so we were able to take the findings and the understanding of greenways from that study and incorporate into actual city policy, which is our Transportation Action Plan. And that's a 10-year plan that outlines what the city will focus on for transportation. And there's a whole topic, we call it, or actually in the bicycling topic, there's a whole strategy around neighborhood greenways that was also shared. And I think something that's interesting to note is that within that is, we say we'll implement neighborhood greenways including new, like brand new routes, which Northside and Southside Greenway would be a part of, and then also upgrade existing bike boulevards that may not be quite as optimal for walking and biking. So I think that's a cool part of that. We do call it high in terms of difficulty, just because it's not something that we have a clear funding mechanism for and an approach. And then also our time frame for that, we say, in years 4 or 7 in the plan. So basically, it's something that we are going to figure out an approach in the coming years. But also we have, as Matthew noted, we also have several things in the works. And so there's multiple ways that we can implement neighborhood greenways. Street reconstruction is a part of it, and just putting specific projects in our CIP is another one. That's the Northside Greenway. We also have a Safe Routes to School project that goes along a portion of the Southside route in 2024. And that's along 10th Avenue between the Midtown Greenway, 34th Street, and then 34th Street, almost over to I-35. And so that's an opportunity to implement elements of a neighborhood greenway as well. I think I'll just stop there and see where the discussion goes and answer questions or let other people speak. So is it back to you, Matthew or Alyssa, for next step?
I think it's probably to me or Heather to open it up for discussion. I think I'm super interested in hearing both what BAC members think about this. In particular, one thing that stuck out to me from Matthew Hendrick's summary, the idea that it took 18 years from the first engagement on the Northside Greenway to groundbreaking on the Northside Greenway. That seems, that's both a testament to everyone's persistence and also a very long time. And thinking about a lot of the conversations that we've had as a committee over the last year or so after the passing of the Transportation Action Plan to say, we as a city need to make big transformative changes pretty quickly. So that's something that stood out to me. I'm curious if there are other things standing out to other folks. And then would also welcome other folks who are calling in. Many of you mentioned living on the route. If there are things that you want to share about your experience of living on the route, I think now would be a great time to chime in, but I think it's just open discussion.
This is Amy. Hello, this is Amy Blumenshine. Am I being heard?
Yes, you are, Amy.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm representing a cluster of blocks. We call ourselves Parkside West sometimes, and we're located between Lake Street and Louisa May Wilder School at 34th Street, and between Chicago Avenue and Powderhorn Park. And we got together when we saw, actually, Jory Engstrom pulled us together because of the kind of near misses related to children and speeding traffic and other scofflaw behavior. And we tried to address that and became aware that actually multiple agendas could be served by actualizing these kind of dusty plans, they seem to us at least, for the North-South Greenway, for in particular our South Greenway along 10th Avenue. We join up for different reasons. Some folks are mostly interested in neighborhood safety related to traffic, and others are folks who use bicycles all the time for transit. But we see common cause in suggesting our set of blocks along 10th Avenue between Lake and Wilder School as a pilot for this Southside Greenway. And I know we're speaking the same tune here. I don't need to convince you folks about the importance of encouraging bicycling and the safe routes to school. Got to get our kids moving. We need less diesel. Climate change is real. And, we think that we're in a particularly good space to model this for others as you get these long thought about plans together. And in our particular circumstances, we've got the current situation at George Floyd Square and the 10th Avenue just a little further south from us, and connecting with the Anderson School, Green School, the whole, how do you connect from the Midtown Greenway to schools? It just seems like the time is now to to pull this off after lots and lots of planning. We tried to get things going in the spring when we learned that our streets were under major overhaul. It is frankly painful to go through all this reconstruction travail and know that it's just going to get put back, you know, not better than it was, when it seems like a missed opportunity. So we want to make sure that we do what we can as people who live here to really press that this pilot, this Southside Greenway, comes to pass. And we want to ask you, what is it? How do we make this go forward? Again, 18 years, you just think about a kid growing up in that time. I mean, in talking to neighbors, we have people say, well, yeah, I'd bike if it were safer, or, you know, if I felt I could take my kids in a safer. And again, I know that these are issues that you're all familiar with, but we want you to know that we are eager to be part of actualizing that plan, and the sooner the better. You know, it's a little clumsy for us since we can't see each other on this. If there's someone else who's prepared to speak to this. Waiting.
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, this is Jory Engstrom. Yeah, I agree with what Amy's saying. And living on 10th Avenue and 31st, there's a lot of activity going on between biking and families, and traffic. And I've seen a lot living on the corner of 32nd and 10th. So just thinking that something does need to be done for families and people that do, ride their bikes and everything, so everybody can feel safe, because the traffic around here could be ridiculous. So it'd be nice if there was some way to have that peace of mind where, we can have safety for everyone in this area.
Thank you so much for sharing. And Phil, I see your hand up if you want to take the floor.
Sure. I would jump in. My perspective is, since we have heard about this long timeline for scheduling as a capital project, the Northside Greenway, the plan for the south side is there. It's not scheduled. My understanding from the presentation is that we don't have money for either one of the four sections right now. But I think, and Amy and I have talked about this, and I know Matthew, you know about this, Matthew Deardahl, that there's certainly specific tactical things that can be done, like the bollard south of Lake Street. I think it's on 10th Avenue, and those some of those interventions. I mean, right, if you're doing a mill and overlay, I know there are limitations about what can be slipped into the scope of work, but it does appear that there are these tactical elements, and they can be simply, and I'm thinking more bicycle boulevards, but they can be tactical elements that change the visual signals to drivers to pay attention, slow down. So trees, greenery, signage, paint markings, bulb outs. There are just a number of these things that feel relatively cheap that we can do before we have a capital budget for an entire greenway or one section of a greenway. So at least that's, as I listen to you, Amy, and as I think about the process for getting the whole enchilada, it seems very important to know when we can and have the city alert to and the BAC to be able to weigh in and press for tactical elements that are not hugely expensive, but can do the most important thing, which is to slow down drivers, have them pay more attention. Thanks.
Thanks. I kind of want to bounce off that a little bit. I think the idea, Amy used the word pilot, and thinking about Matthew Hendricks, you referenced that there was like a pilot project on the north side Greenway, right? And that was part of what catapulted that project into actually getting on the capital agenda. And so thinking about how can some of the things Philip's bringing up around sort of like short-term tactics also relate to this idea of like a pilot for the South Side Greenway before we get to this reconstruction phase, so that, we have a sense of like what it will be like before we do the reconstruction. There's so much we see over and over again in the reconstructions where we're like, well, we reconstructed that, and then 2 years later, we wish we'd known X about this and we would have done this part of it totally differently. And so thinking about how can we both serve some of those shorter term safety needs, but also like make the eventual project that we know we want to do and we'll keep advocating for better, by doing something that is more like a pilot or a demonstration in intention with some of the short term things that Philip was bringing up. I see Bree has a hand up.
Hi, is there anyone who has been involved in the north part of the Greenway planning? Because I know, of course, you said it stalled, but I do remember there was some negative aspects that community members brought up, and I just want to understand where we are today with that sentiment, and then also because all of that back end seemed to have been completed, and it seems like that would be the most logical place to like actually do that section first in my mind, just because you have all that data. Thanks.
So this is Matthew Hendricks, Bree, responding to your question. So I assume you're talking about the north side Greenway and not the northernmost part of the south side Greenway. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Because I think we can just, I just like to learn because we're talking generally about greenways and and how that is at. Because I feel like that was a lot of process as well. Talking about greenways, and it's been on like the top of my mind more so than this other section.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
thanks.
It's interesting. The north side Greenway was never unanimously approved by any body that I can remember. But at each step of the community engagement, there was always well over 50% support for it. And it sort of raises the question of, if we're talking about one street out of dozens and making a change to that one street that enables, safer active transportation and links parks together and creates a lot of benefits, what's the threshold of support that's needed in order to make that change? The other thing I'll say is I think the North Side Greenway was more controversial in the early planning stages than the South Side Greenway was, because there was less familiarity with any kind of precedent. And so when we talked to folks in North Minneapolis who lived close to the 37th Avenue Greenway, which is a short east-west greenway where the street was closed to deal with some stormwater issues and some flooding, right in that area, it was easier for residents to envision what a North Side Greenway could look like because there was an example right there. But that's a small project, and so it doesn't have the same sweep as the Midtown Greenway. So when we were presenting at different kind of meetings in South Minneapolis and we said Greenway, there was just an automatic, very positive starting point in South Minneapolis. Whereas in North Minneapolis, it was more, we'd mention, Milwaukee Avenue and the Midtown Greenway. And those aren't necessarily things that everyone in North is familiar with, nor should they be. They're not local to North Minneapolis. So I think that was a big factor. I think having the 1-year pilot helped a lot with kind of dealing with a controversial component in the sense that people saw what it did and what it didn't do for the community. So that's probably the best way to summarize it.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I haven't heard much about your project, but I know more about the north in North Minneapolis, and just wondered how that affected those decisions. And maybe Matthew has some insight on how that might affect this project moving forward.
I don't know that I have much more to add other than what Matthew Hendricks said. I will note, and maybe Heather can speak to this if you have it, but you know, the evaluation of the 1-year demonstration of the north side was fairly robust, and I think produced very significant positive results. And so I do think that I have an observation that sometimes, you know, opposition can be small but loud, and that's what people sort of latch onto, especially if they aren't sort of aware of the robust engagement and then the results. So that's always something that's stuck with me from that year-long pilot, is like, it was fairly positive, but also there are people that were against it. And I'm not saying that's bad. Like, I think if people have like concerns, you know, when we, you know, if we go back and we're doing conceptual design on a project, we want to like make sure we accommodate you know, different aspects that may present themselves as concerns, whether it's parking or lighting or, you know, maintenance or whatever they may be. So I don't mean to like cast negative opinions about it negatively, but just that there was fairly robust positive support for it.
Awesome. Thanks, you two.
I see Dan has his hand up, but I also want to make sure, I know that folks on the phones don't have the opportunity to use the raise hand function like those of us who are on the Bicycle Advisory Committee. So just want to pause and see if there's anyone else on the phone who would like to chime in, and I will leave a longer than comfortable pause for that.
Hi, this is Lee.
Hi, Lee, we can hear you.
Okay, great, thanks. I introduced myself earlier. Did not say my favorite bike ride, which this summer has been Sundays with my son Sam, who's 3 years old, and we've been biking to different Minneapolis parks. I live just down the street from Jory on 32nd and Elliott, and just wanted to kind of reinforce what she said around safety. Being on the corner, I get to see a lot of the bicycle and pedestrian traffic that goes down 32nd to Powderhorn Park, and it's really, you know, beautiful, and community and people walking and biking. You know, in the evenings they go play soccer and volleyball and just hang out in the park. I am kind of hyper aware of the safety situation right now as our night comes earlier and you know, dusk comes earlier, because typically the families that are using the park in the evening stay there quite late and well into dusk and after dusk. And in the evenings coming home, there's lots of kids biking and walking, and it's very crowded and lots of traffic. And so I am encouraged to think about maybe shorter term, or what people are saying about shorter term safety measures around bollards or different things that might help calm traffic on 10th, even though the process of maybe getting a Greenway is a longer term one. And then just also, I like the concept of, you know, the whole Greenway plan of connecting the parks together. I know when I have visitors in town and we walk around Powderhorn Park, a lot of them are just amazed that we have this amazing gigantic park just right here in South Minneapolis. And, you know, they say if this park was in lots of other cities, it'd be like the premier park of the city. And we're just lucky in you know, Minneapolis to have so many great ones, and to have them connected through the Greenways, I think would be a real value add above and beyond the safety and traffic calming that it would provide as well. So thank you.
Thank you. I think somebody whose phone number ends in 58 was also trying to chime in at the same time as Lee.
Hi, yes, my name is Joran Gustav, and I live, I'm between Elliott and 10th Avenue. My house is the only one that faces that street, and I live right next door to Jory, and just up the street from Lee. And I pretty much see all the activity as 31st Street is, or 32nd Street is
is a major corridor to the park from Chicago Avenue, and I watched a lot of bicycles and pedestrians and dog walkers going to the park, and there have been some traffic issues. Biking is not necessarily safe because of the connection to Chicago and to the park. I'd like to see some safety issues, some safety concerns looked at as far as biking and pedestrian. I love the idea of having the Powderhorn Park connected to the Greenway somehow, and making it safer for people to bike. As I'm a biker myself, I do like having a safer route for children as well.
Thank you for your comments. Thanks for sharing. Anybody else on the phone? Otherwise, I'm going to flip over to Dan Miller.
Hi. I think I first met Matthew Hendricks on a Dark to Dawn ride in 2015, canvassing for the South Side Greenway. I think it was 2015. It may have been a year one way or the other. I just wanted to offer encouragement to this group that has shown up today. One thing that I think is worth considering for the long game is each year there is a public hearing of the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee, where they take both written comments as well as in an informal session, as well as comments that go into the mayor's budget report. They show up there. And one thing that the Northside Greenway did was do that over the years. It influenced the membership of CLIC. It's a 33 member panel of citizens, and they had heard enough of it. In the last year, I think it's 2018, about 20 people from the North Side went to that public hearing, and they each had 2 minutes to talk, and they talked from their heart. And they had written stuff, they had verbal stuff that all went into the mayor's report.
It's 5 o'clock.
And it showed up the next year to have phase 1 of the North Side Greenway. So it's a long game, but you've got to if you can get people to understand that it still exists, that this is a living thing that really is needed, it's an important deal to do. And good luck, and thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Matthew Deardahl, did you have one more comment? You had your hand up, but then you put it down.
Yeah, I guess I'll go quick. I just think one thing I want to note, I guess for the BAC and folks on the call is, the stretch that you're specifically referring to between the Minneapolis Greenway and 34th is in that project, the Safe Routes project, and it might not be the best way to do a full Greenway, so it's a portion, but it's a better answer than frankly I think a lot of folks may get. Because for us, that's pretty near term, 2024, and engagement on that project will start in 2022. So the BAC, you'll get an opportunity to review that per the normal process, and the folks on the call, you will as well. And so I think that's important, and hopefully it will be a good opportunity. And I heard today the question of a demonstration component of that, perhaps before the actual construction of the project, and that's something that we should carry into that engagement phase as well, to see if there's an opportunity for that. So I just wanted to note that, and the other thing is we're going to be talking about our capital improvement program recommendations from the BAC, over the next couple of months. It's on the agenda today. We'll see how much time we have for it, but we've talked about greenways on that for years, and so maybe there's some clarity or specificity we want to add to that based on what we heard today. That's what I have.
Thanks, Matthew Deardahl, and thanks, Matthew Hendricks, for the presentation today. I see a note that we need to move on to our next agenda item that was scheduled for 5. So thank you to all the folks who called in as well. And I'm really excited for us to continue having this discussion to determine how we as the BAC want to comment on some of the things Matthew Deardahl just brought up in terms of a demonstration project in the short term, the Safe Routes to School project, Greenways funding in the next capital improvements program cycle, because I think this is very important stuff. These are the dreams. So thank you again to everybody who called in. You are of course welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but know that this agenda item was your primary interest. So expect that some of you will log off. And with that, I will turn it back over to Heather.
Can I ask a quick question, perhaps of Heather? Just noting the time, do we anticipate ending this meeting at 5:30? And how do we want to handle the two items? I may offer that the CIP resolution we could bump if we wanted to end at 5:30, because what Allison has to say is super interesting and we should give that time. Maybe Chris weigh in too. I just want to ask that question.
Just so you know, Matthew, that we did change this committee so that it is a standing committee at 2 hours, with the intention of trying to shorten it to an hour and a half wherever possible. So I think we're good on time. Allison shouldn't feel rushed. We should have whatever discussion there, and the CIP discussion is pretty short and kind of more of like a offer if anyone wants to do anything. So I think we'll be good on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great, thanks everyone. If that is the end of our discussion here, we'll go ahead and move it forward. And Allison, I can pass the floor over to you.
Great, thanks. Hi everyone. I already introduced myself, but I am Allison Bell, the Green Infrastructure Coordinator with the City of Minneapolis. So I was invited to talk to you all about a little background and status update on the Green Infrastructure Program in the city. So I'm going to do that, talk a little bit about my role and the work we've been doing, and talk about the impacts of the Stormwater Ordinance on our transportation projects, especially around our pedestrian and bike safety projects. And then go through a couple of things that are really important for us to be keeping in mind when we're looking at how green infrastructure and pedestrian safety might interact with each other. So with that, I will start. So just for a little background, my role is pretty unique in the city. It came from calls from the community and from calls from city council to start figuring out how to incorporate green infrastructure on our transportation projects as we develop in the city. So I actually sit half with our transportation planners and half with our surface water and sewer team. I am a water resource engineer by trade and have always been interested in green infrastructure development in urbanized areas. So our green infrastructure program in the city is in 2 major buckets. We have a voluntary program that came, as I mentioned, from calls from the community. And then we have a regulatory program, which came from our attempts to stay within our regulations as an MS4 city, which is some really boring engineering stuff that I'll try to speak lightly about. So the program is meant to align with and kind of maximize our transportation, climate action, and resiliency goals in the city. And all of those goals around transportation, including pedestrian bike safety, greening the streets, all of those that are found in the TAP, and I'm sure are things that you all talk about. Our program also is prioritized, so we aren't just able to put green infrastructure everywhere all the time. We look at site suitability to make sure that what we're putting in the ground is doing what we inherently want it to do, which is mimic the hydrology of the land before we developed on it. And we look at the impact. So is this an area that needs water quality improvements? Is there flooding in the area? Are we really able to provide a major benefit? And then, of course, we look at equity to make sure we're systematically undoing the harm that we've done over time. So another important thing is some definitions. So I said there are 2 buckets for the green infrastructure program, voluntary and regulatory. Our green infrastructure can look like two different things. We call it either sustainable landscaping or green stormwater infrastructure. So overall, greening or green infrastructure is the attempt to mimic the natural hydrology of the land before we developed on it. So basically, it's our key to continue to develop because we obviously development is important for so many things. So allow the city to continue to flourish and develop while undoing the harm that we've done by development. So basically trying to develop, but still keep what we had before. So that can look like sustainable landscaping, which is practices like reducing impervious area, protecting and installing new trees, putting in native plantings and pollinator gardens. Or it can look like green stormwater infrastructure, which is basically everything that we've talked about with an added benefit of managing stormwater. So more commonly, you'll see like a rain garden or a bioswale or permeable pavement that actually take in stormwater, treat it or infiltrate it. I mentioned the two ways we prioritize green infrastructure in the city. This is just a glimpse at some of the maps we have in front of us when we're making decisions about green infrastructure. On the left, we have our overall that looks at those, the soils. Are there any contaminated soils? Are there good infiltrating soils? It looks at our water quality model, so where are our highest needs for water quality? And as I mentioned, it looks at our equity factors, especially putting in a special emphasis on areas like the green zones. But you'll notice in that map that places like North Minneapolis show up a little redder than we'd want. Green is, our high priority areas. So that's due to a lot of factors with suitability. So there's not great soils up there. It's heavily industrialized, so it's not what we commonly think of as suitable for green infrastructure. So in order to combat that, we came up with the map on the right, which is our sustainable landscaping index, and that just looks at tree canopy, vegetation, and proximity to parks. So that allows us to really understand where and which parts of the cities we need to be investing in just greening practices, and maybe stormwater takes a back seat. So those two maps really help us make decisions and prioritize what needs are where. The other biggest tool I have to get green infrastructure on projects is this new stormwater ordinance. So historically, we have exempted linear or transportation projects from having to meet any of our stormwater ordinances in the city. Due to some changes in the state and national regulations, that is no longer allowed. So we now, our linear projects do trigger the ordinance if they disturb the amount of area required to trigger the ordinance. So that's brand new, that we even have to look at the ordinance for the transportation projects. The second big change is that it used to require that you disturbed an acre of land before you triggered the requirement, and we've cut that in half, which was just a move to be progressive in the city and to understand our big challenges. So now if you disturb half an acre, you have to meet the stormwater ordinance. So just high level with the stormwater ordinance, it starts next year. So projects going in the ground starting in 2022 will have to meet the requirements if they trigger the ordinance. And there's three big parts of the ordinance. There's a volume control, so we need a certain amount of water to stay on the site. There's a peak discharge rate control, which means we don't want water leaving the site any quicker than it was before we did construction. And then there's a water quality component where we're trying to remove certain pollutants from the water. So in kind of layman's terms, the volume control usually means we're infiltrating. So we're finding green spaces to let the water go and soak into the ground. There's a few other ways to reduce volume of water. Tree canopy is actually one of the best and pretty robust ways to reduce the stormwater volume on a site. So that works great for all of our initiatives. As I mentioned, that rate control, we just want to make sure water's not leaving too fast, and then remove pollutants. On most of our transportation projects that we're doing any of this pedestrian improvements and safety, those are really not going to be concerned with rate control. So we're just looking to do volume and water quality control. So in order to get our green infrastructure, whether it's voluntary or regulatory on projects with, in a heavily urbanized area where we're all competing for right of way, there's a lot that we keep in mind to make sure that we are always aligning with and improving the safety measures that are put in place and never, competing with them. So Things like we are always keep in mind, and we design with our pedestrian and bike clear zones, so we're never trying to reduce those widths. We're always looking at the transition from our pedestrian and bike spaces into our green infrastructure. So the slopes are really important, making sure we don't have a steep drop off, making sure that we don't just have a drop. We have rules in place that if you have more than a 6-inch drop, you need a vertical barrier. And that we only allow drops up to 18 inches, and those obviously would have to have some sort of barrier. In talking with a lot of bikers, especially with Matthew, I know we are trying to reduce or eliminate the times where we have that vertical barrier, just to not introduce a tripping hazard. So we've come up with some unique ideas on how to do that, and I can walk through probably one of the coolest ones I think that's coming up. So this also encompasses an example of how green infrastructure and bike safety work together. So on the top is kind of our more standard and common separated bike lane, but instead we're starting to turn those into what you see on the bottom, which is taking that space that was reserved for concrete and turning it into a planted area that possibly can intercept stormwater. And so with that, we've actually created a new standard for bike facilities moving forward, and just to kind of give you a sense of what we look at when we do that. So all the way on the left would be the bike lane. And then I mentioned trying to reduce those vertical barriers. You'll see we have a flush curb, so to separate the bike from the green infrastructure, just a flat concrete area. It's 24 inches, which gives you plenty of additional space. And then we even provide a 6-inch flat space, but relatively flat, as part of that transition down. And then you'll see we only allow 3-to-1 slopes, which are pretty mild, down to the bottom. And then this depth would have to be 6 inches or less. So just to kind of give you a sense of everything we keep in mind when we're designing these, and then also how these can work together really well. And then I just wanted to show a couple examples of where we're combining, wherever our planners are extending the curb, we're trying to maximize what we can do in that space. So on the left, it looks really simple, but those are native grasses, so they need way less mowing, no pesticides, no herbicides. And they have much deeper roots, so they require less watering, and they allow water to infiltrate into the ground a lot faster. And that was just a super easy. Instead of concrete, we just push them to put native grasses in. Once we get our mowers on board with not mowing it, will look a little bit better, but it's still a green space. And then on the right is a project up in Hoyer Heights, northeast Minneapolis. These are bump outs. They intercept stormwater and infiltrate it through the bioretention media, clean up all the pollutants, hold the water back to reduce some flooding downstream. And then they're planted with native plantings that you can see are doing really well. And I should have included the picture. Some residents did not want native plantings, so we put sod in those places. And it was pretty delightful to see during the drought that all that sod had died, and this is what these native plantings looked like. So that was kind of a good commentary there. So that was my overview. I wanted to leave time if there was any questions or anyone wanted to dive into anything specific.
Thanks so much, Allison, and we'll just open it up to the floor here for any questions. Go ahead, Dan. Thank you.
Hello, Allison. Thanks for the great presentation. I tried to pull up a photo, but I can't add it to the chat. But wonderful work on Johnson Street Northeast between 18th Avenue and Lowry. They are putting in native plantings along that stretch, that half-mile stretch, and I think it's going to be fantastic.
Oh, great. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, that was a exciting project where we, instead of sod, any of the green spaces in the boulevard are going to be native planting. So I'm glad you know about it. Bill?
Yeah, again, thank you, Allison. It's great to see the systematic way that you're sort of working in green infrastructure elements. The one that sort of jumped out to me, and I'm thinking about mill and overlay projects, is boulevards where you just have your typical sort of high mounded grass, and obviously better to have a scooped, concave profile so that you have water pouring off of a pedestrian path or a bicycle path, into, well, ideally something other than just turf grass there. But is it within a scope of work for a mill and overlay? Is it possible? Has it been done? Can it be possible to, while you've got equipment on the streets, scoop out this, convex mound of crappy turf grass and do something?
I wish I could record these questions and comments. One of the initiatives I am pushing right now is this, basically what we call it a depressed boulevard, is kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, right.
Yep, exactly. So I can say that we are working on different approaches on full reconstruction projects, or any that already are disturbing the boulevard where we have to restore them, where sod will basically be, somebody has to request it. That'll be the last thing that we'll put in. And we'll start with a depressed area of native plantings, and work with the neighborhoods to figure out what look they want specifically. And in terms of mill and overlay projects, I am invited into every program we have in the city, and we look at the program and the budget and the goals. And if it fits in with what we see possible for the project, that's absolutely an option. And hopefully that will become more of a standard approach that we can take. We also have a ton of initiatives through the city. We have a Blooming Boulevards, and we partner with a lot of great folks like Metro Blooms that are really supportive of work like that, even if you wanted to take it on yourself and convert your own boulevard. But I totally agree that, and I totally agree that to me, there's no, I think I bother everybody in our planning group to make sure they're considering green infrastructure, but I'll make sure mill and overlays on my list.
Great, wonderful. Thanks, Allison.
Thanks.
And Allison, this is Bree. You don't have to record this because it is being recorded. So if you need to go back,
I love it.
It's all there.
Yep, that's perfect.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, Allison, you'll just have the clout of our recorded meeting here to add to any further advocacy you might be doing on these points.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, and feel free to reach out if anything else comes up.
Thank you so much,
everybody. Thank you.
All right. So since we are mostly pivoting the CIP resolution planning, Chris, do you want to open the conversation up at all, since we have a little bit of time?
Yeah, sure. So this can really take as little or as much time as you all want. We had discussed having Trey and Mike come from our CIP team to kind of give the intro to the CIP, which goes over to the process and a little bit of what happened in last year, or kind of the current mayor's budget and things like that, as well as a little bit of an extra focus on some equity work that's going into the CIP this year. Unfortunately, today didn't work for them, so that'll happen next month. So I just wanted to leave this on the agenda in case there were questions or comments. Last time, I think many of you were here last time and gave some comments that I've passed on to them about what to include in that presentation, what would be helpful from you, different questions and kind of ways of presenting in terms of what they'll show. So mostly just opening the floor up again to if there's any questions or comments related to the CIP, and if Matthew and I can answer anything, or if you'd like to pass stuff on to next month's presenters. Yeah, Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, so we've got this, the previous year resolution, and are we proposing to write another resolution or to update that resolution? And when would we want to do that?
Yeah, I think we could do it either way. And sorry, I can't tell if my camera's on or not. It's like kind of grayed out, but anyway, so yeah, we could go over the last year's resolution and kind of use that as a starting point and update it if folks are interested in that. We haven't, Heather and Bree and I haven't gotten that detailed, I don't think, in our discussions exactly of kind of how to move forward with this year, or we could start from scratch and take a different approach. So either one of those is on the table at this point.
Is there a date when you wish to finalize it?
So the idea is that this year we're trying to get the conversation rolling a little bit early. I think if we could be putting out some sort of draft like January or February is probably ideal, because the CIP team, and we'll hear this at next month's, but the CIP team passes their recommendations off to click around like April or so, typically. And so the idea is that the resolution from the BAC would begin.
Lost Chris a little bit there. I think he was finishing up, basically just confirming the January, February timeframe.
So, you know, I felt the agenda today was jam-packed full of really, really great stuff that I haven't looked at for a while. And I came away heartfelt about the neighborhood Greenway study that Matthew, you were part of. I think it still stands up. I know that was in process. 2018, I think it kind of went dead, and then it got published in 2019, or that's the publication date on the report. And I think there's a lot that we could update this resolution to that somewhat refers to agenda items we've talked about today, and tighten that thing up. You know, there's a couple things that we just really need to face. I mean, we're still in a pandemic, and being able to line up projects, many of them have been delayed for a few years. I would anticipate that might continue for a while, and that's going to have an impact on us, on what we're hoping to do and the dates that they're supposed to be happening. I'm real concerned about hearing all these 4 to 7 year dates on the transportation action plan list, because, you know, that's liable to go backwards as well. So I would, and just to make this quick, I would really like to, I'd be willing to be part of helping to draft a resolution or update this resolution. I can't lead it, but definitely having something that once a groundwork gets laid down, that we could do some edits offline and be able to work out a document. I'd be willing to be a partner in that. Thank you.
And I just want to say I really appreciate what you just said, Dan, and the conversation today around Greenways. And I think over the coming months, so, you know, November and December, I think we should have some fairly like specific nuanced conversations about some of these topic areas that are still in your recommendation from, you know, previous years that haven't been implemented yet. I think neighborhood greenways is like a top one, and I think we should wrestle with, like, what does it mean, like, to implement neighborhood greenways? You know, we talk about quick build in a way, like we're really emphasizing quick build treatments on our Vision Zero network, you know, our high injury network, and like how do we wrestle with that priority? Do we add neighborhood greenways? You know, do we split up some resources? I mean, just questions like things that I think would be fun to sort of get into in a full agenda item.
And sorry I got cut off there. My Teams just shut down and booted me, but I'm back.
Welcome back.
Well, thank you, Dan and Matthew and Chris. Do we have any decisions maybe that we want to make there? Dan, I'd be happy to also help with that. Drafting language. Alyssa, I'm wondering if maybe you want to be a part of that to some degree also, and how we maybe want to move that forward timeline-wise.
And maybe I can just speak to that a little bit also. So typically, I think we do a lot of that resolution writing for the CIP in the meetings in kind of a working form fashion. I think that we've given ourselves enough time to be able to get a start doing that as well this year. There may still be some need, or it could just help to kind of do things outside of it as well. But I do think we can kind of collaboratively in the meetings start to write some of those. And the goal after we get Mike and Trey in to kind of do that groundbreaking thing or kind of introduction would be to use the rest of those meetings as working meetings where we have the text up in front of us and kind of build that on the fly. At least that's how we've done it in the past. So I'll just propose that. And of course, anyone who's willing or wants to do anything outside of the meetings in terms of pulling together kind of language to put forward in front of folks, that's always welcome as well.
Dan, do you have a follow-up question to that? I can't tell if your hand is still up or newly up.
I'm sorry. Yes, it's up, and I'm doing weird stuff trying to turn myself on and off. So I think Alyssa did a lot of the work on last year's resolution, and it was a good ground plate, and it's a place to begin and to say what works and maybe what stuff has changed and maybe what should be taken off. Having been through this for a few years in a row, we have some things that have been on there for some time that, quite frankly, I had to scratch my head to remember what they were. But I think starting with something and being able to, it could be this, or it could be something that shows adjustments to what we know going forward this upcoming year. So I think in combination what Chris is saying, I think being able to give the group something, and whomever feels a need to or desire to help out would be a way to jumpstart this, so we have a really good conversation about this by the time we submit it. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Chris. Feels like a good plan moving forward to me. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we've reached our 5:30 time, and maybe we can pivot to any updates that folks want to share here as we close out. All right.
Jenny Borden has an update, I think.
Yeah, I do. I'm so excited. I'm like, now, right? Like
now, right?
Yeah. So, well, first, just to know, tomorrow is walk, bike, and roll to school day. I was just gonna get you guys a total of how many schools are signed up, but it looks like the website's crashed. So it's 30-some schools are celebrating, which is awesome. But other awesome news is Minneapolis Public Schools is getting a 4th bike fleet funded through the City of Minneapolis Public Works. So we're super excited. I think 4 bike fleets will be enough bike fleets to get us to our goal of universal bike education. We're just over 50% with the 3 we have. We should be able to get to 3/4 with this additional fleet, and then helping some schools move into school fleets and working with partners to get the rest. So super exciting. It should be out purchased now and out in the spring. I'm really hoping we have, the original is white, we have big red, we have big blue. I'm really hoping for green. So stay tuned on that, and thanks for all your support and advocacy in supporting universal bike education for 4th and 5th graders in Minneapolis public schools.
And maybe I'll just add, super exciting. When we were going through the transportation action plan process for biking, having the goal of supporting Minneapolis public schools in their effort to get universal bike education to the 4th and 5th graders through the Walk Bike Fund, that was important. And it, our division, as we were like sort of brainstorming different ways we could try to, we're always thinking about ways we can implement TAP, and this was one that just seemed like it was very important to us. And so we, we're very excited for that to happen, and look forward to cool pictures of kids on bikes learning how to ride.
Cool pictures, and biking along sometime, especially with the folks biking in your wards. So.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Congrats, Jenny. Yay.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And Dan, I see you've got a lot of stuff in the chat there. Do you want to explain that for folks that can't see the chat? Or do you want me to read that out?
Dan, you're on mute.
Thank you. So what I put in the chat was just a public hearing that's going to happen tomorrow, October 6th, at the Minneapolis Park Board and Recreation headquarters. And it regards amending the Code of Ordinance regarding parking vehicle speeds. Okay. And what the essence of it is no vehicle shall be driven at more than 30 is struck, 20 is replaced miles per hour on any parkway or highway on which a different speed has not been established by the Commissioner of Highways. On any parkway where a different speed has been so established and signs have been posted calling attention to such zone, no vehicle shall be driven at a speed greater than the indicated on such signs. So I just wanted to make people aware of that. You can write a comment directly to, instead of having to sign up and be there verbally. And if you would like to add your input into supporting lowering the speed limit on parkways, that might be something worthwhile. You have to do that by 12 p.m. on October 6th, and you would send that to Jennifer Reingold, and her email address is jringold@minneapolisparks.org. And that is in the chat. I apologize. I thought I grabbed it mostly, and I got a bunch of garble in there. But yeah, it's an exciting prospect that see where it goes.
Dan, this is Bree. Do you mind just emailing all of us it as well?
Yeah, I think I could do that. Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm also copying it into the minutes for today, so it'll be there as well.
Yeah, and it's October 6th, of course, is tomorrow, and the deadline is at noon, so it's for written comments. So doesn't need to be a lot, but I think it's worth if you have a voice in that to respond. So I'll try to email this out to the general group. Matthew Deardahl, is it possible for you to do that? Because I don't know if I've got an updated list, because everything that Millicent sends is blind now.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Can you just?
I sent it to you early before the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Bree, so you have the entire thing.
Okay.
And let's see, Chris, maybe remind us that you're feeling that in the future we shouldn't be putting such content in the chat, even for announcements, because it's in the chat. Is that we can't read it all?
We just can't put things in the chat that are related to content. So like you can use the chat to say like, I would like to speak next, or like I have something, or like even we've had someone say like, here's the resolution language, just sending it so that you can put it in the minutes or something. But if it's like a content to be shared thing, we just shouldn't get in the habit of putting things in the chat that can be said. And if it's bigger and like something like this, then I think emailing the group is more appropriate.
Okay.
I don't know. Does that make sense? Or
sure, this was too much to be said, even though Dan summarized it. Which
so yeah, I think the summary was great, and I think in the future we just wouldn't put in the chat. We'd just say that summary, and then if there's anything that could be put along in an email, then an email would be good. But it just starts to get into open meeting law stuff, and so the less we can put in the chat, the better, basically.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions, Alyssa?
Are we at the announcements portion of the agenda? Sorry, I came back.
We are.
Great. I assume someone already reminded all of us that Open Streets Lindale is this weekend. Another note, so MnDOT has a Sustainable Transportation Advisory Council. They call it the STAC because we can't help but abbreviate everything. And this group is pretty involved in setting sustainable transportation goals for the state. They are now accepting applications through the end of October 29th, for their 2022-2023 Advisory Council. So if you know folks who are very concerned with sustainable transportation and want to get involved in making policy recommendations at the state level, folks should take a look at that and sign up. And then I will just also note, generally, I do maintain an active email list of members. So if there's ever anything anyone wants to send as an announcement to the full membership, I have that email list in addition to Matthew and Millicent. You are more than welcome to ask me to send it. If it's on a super short time frame, like the same day, I may not be able to get to it, but we'll always do my best. So we'll just put that offer out there.
Thanks, Alyssa. Any other updates or announcements? All right. Well, after that uncomfortably long silence, waiting to see if anyone else speaks up, can probably bid each other adieu.
Bye. Okay, everyone.
Bye. Thanks,
thank
Heather.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.